Hi everybody, I'm Ruth, if you don't know me. Today I'm going to be talking about hope versus disappointment. And I have recently come out of a place of terrible weight of disappointment. So I want to kind of be vulnerable and speak from my experience. But I want to start off by speaking God's truth about hope. I'd encourage you to go through the Bible and look up, if you're discouraged, and you're going through where you can't see that things are going to change, go through the Bible and look at all the verses on hope, and they will edify your spirit and encourage you. So Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And this is what we have to hold on to. We're not always going to feel hopeful, like we're not always going to feel joyful, but it's often a knowing in our spirit and, trusting God's truth over our lives. Everything in the Bible was written to tell a story, to encourage us. And there are so many stories of hope where people have gone through great trials first and then the hope came. And I spoke about the trials that Joseph went through in another video that I did. So I was in a place of disappointment. It was so bad that I actually felt incredibly low. And I even heard the enemy say, you're better off not being here. Now, obviously, I know that's not my voice. Some people have never heard that, and some people are terrified when they do. Because I have a history of mental health, I am used to hearing that kind of thing sometimes. And in that disappointment, these are things that I felt: frustration. There was definitely wallowing, and there was a terrible, terrible sadness, as I mentioned at the beginning, and a feeling of failure as well. I felt very far from my dreams, but God told me that they had actually become idols. And so he was stripping them all away, not to be unkind, but to say, look, if you have nothing else, you have me, and that should be enough. Because I believe in dreams, and I'm going to speak about that in another video. But our purpose is not just in what we do, it's mostly in who we are. So don't ignore your emotions. So it's very important in disappointment not to pretend you don't feel disappointed. So it's okay to recognize that God gave us emotions and process those emotions. And then you'll get to the point of, are you going to continue feeling disappointed and not change, not do anything? Or are you going to go the way of hope and realize that God has something for you? And he's also growing our characters as well. So you have a choice to decide on hope. Like we have a choice to have that perspective of heaven, that God has the best for us. But many people in the Bible, the disciples, for example, I'm sure their dreams when they were young were not to be martyred, or but one was martyred. And I know that a lot of them had already established careers and things that they thought they were going to do for the rest of their lives. Like Peter being a fisherman, that was just, second nature to him. But he got to live with the physical Jesus, and there's no better privilege than that. And so his dreams and purposes would have shifted from what he may have imagined. And so God works through us. Even when we don't feel like God is doing something, we always have the opportunity to bless people. And in that great discouragement, I said to God, what is my purpose then? If I'm not doing this, this and this, what is my purpose? And my purpose, he said, is to encourage. And so doing videos like this, that is to encourage people. And so sometimes our purpose can look different from what we think it's going to look like, because that can be our control over the situation and over our purpose. And God will just use you. He will use you to bless people. And that's one of the great reasons that we're here, is to bless people. So in your disappointment, what are you learning from it? we learn so much from the disappointment of how to do things better, how to think differently, and how to go at things again. Many people that have in disappointment, they've stayed in that place of disappointment, haven't moved on, and many people have used it to say, this is how I'm going to do things another way, because that didn't work out. And sometimes they've had to do things several times, and then they will get the success that they are hoping for. So keep your hopes up, okay? Because we are hopeful people. God made us hopeful people. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I was disappointed about and am disappointed about. One of them is my weight. On mood stabilizers, it does make you crave sugar. You'll never fill up, and you're always hungry. So it's a real challenge, but some of that is emotional eating as well. So sometimes we can make excuses not to change. And so for me, I'm going to go through a period of having no sugar. I'm going to try and do that for a few weeks. It sounds like a scary thing to do, but what I'm doing is not working. You know, I'm having sugar and it tastes wonderful, and then I'm just eating it for the sake of it. And I'm doing, this is hurting my body. You know, I have in my generation family, diabetes, and I am at the age now that I need to nip this in the bud, and I want to be healthy. The enemy will tell you lots of lies about staying stuck where you are. So remember, in disappointment, if you want to move forward, you have to come out of that place. And I remember seeing in that disappointment, I saw so many rainbows in my flat, because the skyline is amazing. Within a few days, I'd never seen that many before. And God was reminding me of his promises over my life. So I'm doing something about it. You can do something about things. You know, you can bring hope. So one of the big disappointments of last year is that I had mental health relapse. I have depression every year, and because I've had it so many times, I kind of power through. It feels awful. It's like walking through sand. But what are the things that I need to do, put in place? I'll talk about those in another video, and then I go for it, and I get better. But this time, there were lots of smaller triggers, and then 2 huge triggers, and I went into a time of psychosis. It was terrifying, and I'd forgotten how awful it was. Fortunately, when I went back to the doctor, and I felt shame, which I'm always telling people not to feel shame. I felt like I was going backwards, because I hadn't been I've been on medication for years, and it's amazing. But I felt a failure. I felt like I was going backwards to have to go back to a psychiatrist and under a psychiatric team again. And that was my pride as well. And it was awful. It was a horrible time of disappointment. But do you know what? I clung to Jesus, and I had a lot of help with friends and family, but it made me closer to God. Because sometimes in the most difficult times, we're like, Jesus, Jesus, you know, we should want Jesus all the time, but we're like, I can't do this. I can't get through any moment without you. And so there was something beautiful about our relationship, even though it's a big struggle. But I'm in recovery now. 4 months later, I think it took a good 2 months to feel anywhere near stable. And then, you know, I've learned so much. I don't want mental any relapse like that again. But do you know what? The relapse still wasn't as bad as it had been in the past. So I'm grateful for that. And also, God keeps reminding me, you've got to be grateful for being what you have now. Because as a visionary, I'm always thinking to the future, and I've seen what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. But at the moment, I have nothing. The plan is, God said, there's no plan. So I've been doing things for years to lead up to something which I thought was going to happen, and it's not going to happen right now. And there was a huge crushing disappointment about that. But I have made those steps forward, and I am doing things that is living out that calling. So I just enjoying every day and not jumping too far ahead. Enjoy the gratefulness of what you have right now, because God has already given us so much. And sometimes, especially in the Western world, we're looking at what we can get, what we can have. And it should be like, what are we giving out? So I don't work. I've done lots of voluntary things. And I ran a mental health organisation for a few years around what I could manage, because it was about people's gifts and not labels. But God asked me to lay that down because I was going to go into something else, which I haven't quite gone into yet. And so sometimes God asks us to do things, and I thought, wow, at the time it was okay, but then afterwards, the disappointment of we'd grown something. It was the one job I could never be sacked from, because all the jobs I'd ever had, they'd been taken because I wasn't well. And we'd done so much good work. But I'm using all of those things that I learnt with event planning and publicly speaking, all that kind of thing, to do what I'm doing now. So nothing is wasted. Everything you do or go through, you can use it as an opportunity for growth and for learning. So so I don't work, and so there can be a lot of pride about that and embarrassment that I'm on benefits and things like that. But I shouldn't be, because I haven't done anything wrong. But sometimes our purpose lies within things that we do. And I got a great opportunity to restructure a book, which I wrote a while ago, and I've gone back to it after a year away, and the publisher that was remotely interested said I need to restructure. And so there was that disappointment of sending all these copies of this draft off to all these publishers, and everyone saying no. But I've got that hope. I have that time as well, so I can work around what I can manage. So, not being conducive to work hours, because my capacity is different. If I can manage a couple of hours writing one day, but not put the pressure on myself, so I get the privilege to write. And so lots of people that are working don't have time for all these extra things. I also really want to be married. I was married years ago, and I've been divorced 19 years now, and I very much desire to be married. And sometimes that can be so intense that it takes over. But also, God is a jealous God, and He loves to spend time with us. And so I've got the opportunity to spend time with God. And I've spoken to people that've got children and kids, and you look at the grass is greener, but actually they don't have the same kind of time that I have to spend with God. And so I'm not looking at like to compare things, but I would love to be married. I believe I will be married. And there's been the disappointment of I've decided physically not to have a child because of the mental health, the risk of psychosis, and I need lots of sleep, and I would want to be a good mum, so it wouldn't be fair. But that was a grieving process and a disappointment and something I had to let go of. But now I'm like, actually, I just love to be married to someone and we could be in ministry together. And so that's something to hope for, to look forward to. So I lost a friend in the last few months. Not physically, they didn't pass, but we fell out, and I won't go into details out of respect for that person. And it isn't one or other, in the wrong. But that was a huge disappointment, because my friends are, after Jesus, everything to me. But again, they've become an idolatry there, because God should be number one. And there was a great loss and sadness, and we lose people often in our lives. Some people for our whole life, some people go in and out of our lives. And so that was very, very tough, but also it feels like the right thing. And as Christians, sometimes, I know I do, think that I need to be friends with everybody. And we need to love everybody, but we're not always going to be doing life with everyone. And also, God reminded me, lots of other people have come into my life as well. So I've got those relationships to enjoy. So I just want to remind you that, God says in His word in Jeremiah about purpose, 29:11, which is quite a well-known verse that we use when we talk about purpose, but it's, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So God wants everyone to have a future, whatever that's going to look like. He has so much hope for your lives. So I think I've covered everything. Yes, so yeah, don't miss out on today's blessings. Get through your discouragement. What have you learned? How are you going to change? And keep hoping, because as we hope, the dreams come back alive. And also, once I'd finished the process of being sad and kind of grieving, when I let go of that and said to God, thank you that I didn't have those things, and for taking something that I thought was going to happen, which I didn't think I would get around to saying, it was all about trust. So sometimes when we see everything, it doesn't require us to trust. And so I had to trust God, and that was hard because it just didn't make sense to me. And then once I had trusted in God, 2 wonderful opportunities have come up. And I'm sure I'll be speaking about those at some point. So, yeah, bless you.